Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Stp, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. All right, so today we're going to be painting Night Campfire, and I'm going to be sipping a little Pinot Grigio. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. All right, so the materials that we're going to be using today is a 16 by 20 primed stretched canvas. You can get this at any of your local craft stores, and of course you could switch up the size, but I'm going to use a 16 by 20. I'm going to be using acrylic paint. The colors I'm using is chrome yellow, fire red, titanium white, phthalo blue, and Mars black. And again, of course, you can switch up those colors if you'd like, but those are the ones I'm using. You're going to need a cup of water for washing your brushes. You're going to need a paper towel for drying your brushes. And then the two brushes I'm using today is a 1-inch wide bristle brush and a number 6 round synthetic brush. And that is all the materials that you're going to need for today's project. All right, so the first step that we're going to be doing is the sky. We're going to be going about 3/4 of the way down, and we're going to be using the 1-inch bristle brush. So the 3 colors I'm going to be using are black, blue, and white. I'm going to be using mostly blue with a little bit of black as I start the sky and a little bit of white as I end the sky. So I like to paint the edges or the sides of my canvas, so I'm going to start up at the top. I'm just using a left to right brush stroke. And it's going to be nice and dark up at the top, which is why I'm using just a little bit of black. I don't want it to go totally black, and the black can very easily take over, so just kind of be lenient on the amount of black that you use. And then I'm just dipping my brush into the blue as I come down the canvas. So that way it will transition into a little bit lighter of a blue as it's coming down. And then when I feel like I'm almost done with that sky, I'm going to be adding some white into my mixture. So that way it looks like that sky is going to be getting lighter and lighter as it goes down towards the horizon line. And again, I'm just kind of going left to right. You can use a good amount of paint at this point because we will be having it, take a little while for it to dry before we put anything else on top of it. So again, you'll see that I do these continuous strokes left to right. And what that helps me do is almost eliminate any little cut marks that I might have. And a cut mark for me is like if you stop your brush halfway through, you'll get a little mark like that. So I like to just make sure that I follow through to avoid those marks. And using this type of brush, this bristle brush, you might find that it looks a little bit streaky as you go along. In this particular painting, that's okay because you're going to have so many other things on top of it with your trees and your stars and the big fire that's going to go in the middle of it. It's not really going to make all that big of a difference. But if you wanted to and if you had the time, you could certainly do a second layer on this sky. I'm only going to do the 1 layer because I know that it gets disguised enough as we go into the future steps. So that single layer is plenty for me. And again, I'm going to go about 1/3 of the way down my sky. So I'm almost, or the way down my canvas, and I'm almost there. So I am just about ready to start adding white to my sky. And what's going to happen is it's going to get nice and light right down here at the bottom of the sky, which is going to provide a really kind of natural transition to that horizon line, because usually when you're looking at a horizon, the sky does tend to get a little bit lighter as it's meeting the land. So by just adding a little bit of white down here at the bottom, that's going to provide a nice illusion for the viewer. And you can see I'm just kind of going back and forth just to get this to make sure that it blends good enough. I think I want to come down just a little bit further with this sky, just so I have a good balance on my painting. And then we are going to use this brush for the next step, but you're going to want to wash it and dry it. So after you're done with this step, you can just push this brush down to the bottom of your cup And if you spin it around at the bottom, that'll get the majority of these colors off. And then you're just gonna dry it on your paper towel and get ready for the next step. So for the next step, we're gonna be doing the ground. We're gonna be using black paint only, and I'm gonna be using my 1-inch bristle brush. So what I'm first gonna do is I'm gonna be creating myself a horizon line. I have a couple of little hills in here, but the trick is I wanna keep my profile nice and low in that center part, because that's where my fire is gonna go. So what I do is I take my bristle brush, and in order to get it in control, what I like to do is I squish it on the side of my palette. That brings my bristles nice and together. And on the left-hand side for me, I'm gonna do just a little bit, a couple of little hills in through here. You can make them pointy, you can make them really whatever you imagine them to be. They could be really tall, they could be short. I'm cool with whatever you want your little hills to be. And this is land, so it doesn't have to be a perfectly straight line, but I do like it to keep that low profile in through here. And then over on the right-hand side, maybe I just make myself a different one than I have over here. And then when I'm all set with that, all I need to do is color in this bottom portion black. So there's no fancy brush stroke. You just wanna do it in whatever way is most comfortable for you. The black is really, it saturates really nicely on the canvas, so you don't have to worry about streaks or anything like that, because it will penetrate the canvas nice and just get a nice full coverage on that first coat. You do want to make sure you get all the way down to the bottom of your canvas. I will wait until the end to actually paint that underside or that under edge of my canvas, because if I did that right now, it would just stick to my easel. So I just wait until later to fully do that part. And as you can see, I'm continuing to paint the edges of my canvas as I go, and I'm almost done with this section in through here. And then we will be switching brushes for the next step. So after you get this step done, you're gonna put this the big bristle brush into your water cup, and you'll take out the small round brush and just dry it off on your paper towel and get ready for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, we're gonna be doing the tree trunks. I'm gonna be using my number 6 round brush, and I'm gonna be using black paint only. And the goal here is you wanna get a perspective. So you want the trees that are far away to be really small, and the trees that are close to us to be really big. So I'm gonna do my 2 small ones first, and I'm gonna off-center mine a little bit to the right. I'm gonna keep them about 4 or 5 inches away from each other. And for me, a trick on my brush is if I want it nice and pointy, I just spin it in my paint on the side of my palette. I'm gonna decide where I want my fire to go. So I'm gonna put my fire right about here. So my first line is just gonna be this little tiny, maybe 1 inch tall tree trunk, and the same thing over on the left-hand side, maybe 1.5 inch tall. And I'm just making vertical ones. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna progressively make them bigger. And you can have as many tree trunks as you want, or as few as you want. Just know the more you have, the more you're gonna have to paint. And sometimes when you do too many, sometimes it gets a little bit confusing with the tree tops. So, you can keep yours the same number as mine, or you can certainly do more if you'd like. But you can see as I go towards the edge of my canvas, I'm making them taller and wider. And it's just black paint, and it does not have to be a perfectly straight line. These are not telephone poles that we're making, these are trees. So, and then I'm gonna do the same thing over on the left side, only this time, maybe I'll make a different number of trees. So I have 5 on that side, maybe I'll go for 6 on this side, or 5. Boy, it's gonna be hard for me to do 6. Why don't I do a couple little ones in through here? See, you can improv as you go. This one's gonna have more. And you can certainly make as many as you want or as few as you want. That's totally up to you. And mine are gonna be close together, but that's all right. I'll figure out a way to make it work. And then I'm gonna do this last one over here is gonna be my biggest one. So when you get this step all done, we will be switching brushes back to that big brush, the bristle brush. So you can put this small round one in your water cup and then take out your big one in preparation for the next step. So the next step that we're going to be doing is the first layer of the leaves of the tree tops. So I'm going to be using my bristle brush. I'm going to be using black paint only. And what I'm doing here is I'm just dotting. I'm going to do my big trees first because they're kind of the star of the show. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of dot in what I want that top tree to look like. And as you can see, I'm clearly just going right over that next tree, which is going to happen in nature. But if you've got them close together like mine, that will happen. And maybe I want this one to be really far over here. In my head, I'm saying my treetop is like this big. So it's definitely going to go off my canvas, this first one. At least mine is. You might have shorter trees that this doesn't happen to, but I've made mine really kind of tall. And you can see I'm not filling in the whole thing. I am just kind of giving it like an outline almost for the way that I want that tree to inevitably be. And that one's going to be a big, huge one. And then I'm going to come over to this side and do the same thing. I'm going to pretend like these other trees aren't here for a moment because I want this big tree to be as big as it needs to be. And sometimes when you start with those other trees, you end up doing the top of this one too small. And again, I'm going to imagine where this entire treetop would be. So that's why you find I'm going pretty far out over here, and it's just going right off of my canvas because I want it to be balanced with the size of that trunk. And then I do still want to keep some of this open air underneath. So just know that you don't want to, paint it 100%. And now I'm just going to go in for these tree tops, which are not as important as that first one. So what I can do is just this one of course is just hidden behind here, so that one doesn't even matter. So this one I'm just going to kind of dot whatever I feel is the appropriate size for it. I'm going to do the same thing for here. And if you can somehow keep where you can see a little distinction of that treetop, then you'll be able to see the difference between them. Otherwise it looks like just a row, which works out as well also. But just know if there's any way that you can get like a little distinction on each treetop, that just gives you a little bit more information for the viewer. And again, this one is just kind of hidden behind that one. My next one is going to come somewhere in through here. And of course they're getting smaller and smaller as they go. And mine are pretty close together, so I'm probably not going to get much of a distinction on that treetop, but if I can, great. I got a little bit going on there. And then we're going to be switching brushes back to that small brush, your number 6 round brush. So when you're all set with this, you can see I'm just kind of fiddling at this point. When you're all set, you can put this big brush away in your water cup and take out your wash and dry your small brush for the next step. All right, so what we're doing now is we're going to be using the number 6 round brush. We're going to be using black and white paint, and we're making the rocks for our fire. So it is okay if the width of your rock formation overlaps some of these smaller trees. You don't want it to go too far out because then your fire will also overlap, but it's okay if it overlaps a little bit. What I'm going to be doing is at all times I'm going to have white and black on my brush. I'm going to be creating a partial oval for the shape of my fire pit, so to speak. So I'm going to start by just kind of making these almost wiggle marks that are in like kind of a circular formation. I made them smaller at the top. As I'm going towards the front of the fireplace, they're going to get a little bit bigger. You want them to look different from one another. So I don't sit on any one and just paint it because I want it to be have varying colors in it. So it's all right if they touch one another. It's okay if some of them are darker than the other. It's okay if you have a couple in the front and you know it's not just one circle. You can certainly have them in varying places. And that's all I'm going to do for the rock formation. I do want to use this brush for the next step, but I'm going to have to wash it and dry it. So after you get done with the rocks, you're just going to wash and dry your small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so for the next step, we're going to be finishing our tree trunks. We're going to be using the number 6 brush, and the 3 colors that we're going to be using is red, yellow, and white. And if you need to, you can go into the black. I'm going to start with just red. My goal here is to make the side that is facing the fire the lightest. So on the trees on the right side, I'm going to get the left side to be light and the right side to be dark. And on the left trees, I'm going to get the right side to be light and the left side to be dark. I will also be bringing these tree trunks down into the ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with red on all of my trees, on all the tree trunks. So I have red on my brush, and I'm just going to start with that red going down the tree trunk, and I'm just going to almost bring it into the right side, but not a whole lot. And what's going to happen is this red will get a lot darker as it dries. We're going to be adding the yellow and white on it in a minute, but I'm just going to start by adding my red, because the red is a real safe color to start with, because I know that it's going to turn really dark as it dries. So if you do something that you don't like, don't worry, because it'll be an easy correction. But as you can see, I'm keeping that right side a little bit darker. And as you get into these smaller trees, it's a little bit more difficult to control where it's going, and these tiny trees almost don't matter as much as the big trees do. But again, I'm going with red first, and I'm just doing that side that is near the fire, and then I just kind of fade it out into the dark side of the tree. I'm going to go down this one too. I'm going to go down all of them. I just went outside the black a little bit, but that's all right. And I'm noticing I think I want this tree to be a little bit longer. And if you want to, you can kind of kick that tree out a little bit at the bottom. That'll make it look a little bit more natural. And then I'm going into a couple of these smaller trees here. I don't have too many more to go. And I'm just fading that paint out into the dark side. So I, in essence, just load my brush once, especially for those big trees. These small trees, I can kind of use the same paint on the next ones. And then once I have that red on there, I don't even wash my brush. I'm just going to start using yellow and white. And now I'm going to add a little bit of an even brighter highlight on the left side of these trees, and I'm going to go on the right side of the other trees. So again, just yellow and white on my brush to add that little bit of a more severe highlight on the left side of the tree. And again, as you get towards these smaller ones, I do slow down just a little bit just so I can control where my brush is going to go. And I don't do a whole heck of a lot. I just want to add that brilliance from the fire onto the edges of these trees. So that way, when it does dry, you've got a great illusion happening with the reflection from from the fire. And again, I just got a couple more to go here. Just a little bit of yellow and white over on the side where the fire is. And then I just have these tiny ones over here. And I don't need to go too much into detail as I get into these smaller ones, because they're so far away and they're so little, they almost don't matter as much. And you might end up putting some fire in front of them anyways. And then we are going to use this brush for the next step, but you're going to want to wash it and dry it. So after you get your highlights on your trees, you're going to take that small brush, wash it and dry it, and get ready for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, we're going to be using the number 6 brush. We're going to be doing the highlight on the ground. So this is meant to be reflections on the dirt or on the rocks that are on the ground, which will be from the fire. So I'm going to use every color on my palette. I'm going to start with red because red's my safe color. I know that it's going to dry darker. I do not hold my brush tight. I kind of just loosely hold it so it allows me to give it a natural kind of wiggle going across here. So there's my red. Maybe I pick up some yellow. The yellow will be super dark also as it dries. So I'm gonna add a little bit of white in a minute, but I'm also gonna use some blue. I've got some blue going on now. And these, without the white in them, are gonna be really dark. So right now I'm gonna add a touch of white. And then if at any point, like, I feel that I've gone too bright or I've got too much going on, that's when I can pick up some black. And like I see I've got some missing spots down at the bottom of my canvas, so I'm just gonna use that black to tidy this up. And then when you feel like you have enough brightness going on here, like you've got some good reflections, we are going to use this same brush for the next step, but I'd like you to wash it and dry it. So wash and dry that small brush in preparation for the next step. All right, so for the next step, we're gonna be using the small brush. We're gonna be making stars in the sky. I'm gonna be using white paint only, and this is probably the easiest step because all I'm doing is I'm making a whole bunch of tiny little dots. You can do this with different tools. You could use the butt end of your brush. You could use a toothbrush and like splatter it on if you wanted to. But I like mine to kind of be controlled. So what I'm doing is I kind of almost bounce my brush off my canvas. That allows me to get some small ones and some bigger ones. I don't really want it to look like it's snowing, so I don't want to have humongo ones. I suppose you could. Me personally, I don't go camping when it's snowing out, but maybe you do. So if you wanted there to be big snowflakes, I'm cool with that. But I do like to put a couple kind of peeking through these branches. That kind of, to me, gives it a neat effect. And again, you can see I'm just kind of like bouncing the tip of my brush on as I go along. And you could have a billion stars. Maybe you want a shooting star going across the sky. That's totally up to you. You could sit here for 3 hours and just dot on stars if you'd like to. But I think I'm almost ready to call it on mine. I think I've got a good number going on here. And then we're gonna switch brushes to the big brush. So after you've got all your stars on, you'll put your small brush away in your water cup, take out your large brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so for the next step, what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be doing our treetops. I'm gonna be using my bristle brush. The predominant colors that I'm gonna be using are red, yellow, and white. I might have to go into the black if I've made it too bright, but those are the 3 colors that I'm using. You could also use green. I've seen a lot of people use green on this. You could make green by using the black or yellow, just a touch of black and a touch of white. That will make green. Or you could just pick green out of your paint supplies. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with red. The trick here, we are going to do similar to what we did on the tree trunks. We want the side that's towards the fire to be the lightest. So what I'm gonna do is I've got my red paint. I'm gonna start with my big trees and I'm just kind of dotting. I want to keep some of that black showing. I have that black there for a reason. I want it to give you some shadows underneath and be more of like a silhouette in the darkness of this night. So as I'm going towards the right side, I'm dotting less and less, plus I have less paint on my brush. So as I'm doing my red, now I'm gonna go and do this big red tree over here. And again, I've got it brighter on the side where that fire is. So that's where I start with my paint because I have the most paint on my brush right there in the beginning. So I've got that side being the brightest, and as I move towards the exterior of that tree, that's when I start to dot less and I have less paint on my brush. So it will naturally get darker as it goes over there. And then I'm gonna continue with my red, and get the exterior of these, or excuse me, the side of the fire with the red. And you can see I'm just kind of dotting it like that. And then I'm gonna do the same thing on this side of the trees. I'm gonna put the red more heavily on the side where the fire is. So once I get my red on there, I'm not gonna wash my brush. I'm just gonna start going into my yellow and my white. And this is going to give you that ultimate vibrancy on the tree where it's meeting, where it's on the side of the fire. And you could get this to be as bright or as subtle as you want. That's totally up to you and what your visual preference is. You do want to make sure that you kind of cover or hide the bottom of that trunk. And then I'm going to keep doing this to the other trees. So just a little bit of yellow and white. And I'm doing it on the side where that fire is going to be. And then I'm going to go ahead and do it on this side as well, starting with my big tree because I want that one to look like it's in front of the other ones, and I want it to look like it's the one that's closest to me, so that's where I like to start. And if you find like all your dot marks are starting to look alike, just turn your brush or press at a different firmness. That will give you a good diversity and variety in what you're seeing. Now that I've got that big tree done, now I'm gonna start tackling these littler ones. And I want to turn a little bit too bright for me, so. And again, I'm just adding that brightness on the side where the fire is. And then when you feel like it looks the way that you want it to, then what you're gonna do is we are going to switch brushes back to that the small brush. I'm just kind of fiddling here to make sure I've got mine the way that I want it. And then I'm digging that. So I'm gonna put my big brush away in my water cup. I'm gonna wash and dry my small brush in preparation for the next step. Okay, so for the next step, we're going to be creating your fire. I'm using the number 6 round brush, and I'm gonna be using red, yellow, white, and blue, because there's blue in fire. So I'm gonna start with my safety color. You can sense a theme going on throughout this painting. So for my fire, to make it look a little bit more natural, you want it to come out and in, and then your flames kind of flail out. If you come straight up, it's gonna look like you have the top of a volcano or something, and it's gonna look like your fire is just shooting right out of the ground. So you wanna try and avoid doing that. So what I'm gonna do to start this and to get my brain going in the right direction is I'm gonna start at the bottom, and I'm gonna actually make that type of movement on the left, and I'll do it also on the right. And it's okay if it goes in front of a tree. It's also okay if you start dragging through wet paint. But this gets my brain to say, okay, there's my shape, and I can just kind of follow that shape. And you also want to have some like little pieces that come flailing out the sides as well. So all these little intricacies create a more natural look. But once I get that initial shape, I get to just start having some fun with it. So I use a lot of paint. I'm going to reload my brush often, and as you can see, I'm starting with my red, so I can get this going in my, in the direction that I want. I am gonna get it pretty tall. You might find that you end up hitting some of your trees, but that's okay. As long as you don't catch them on fire, you should be fine. And I like to do those like little sparks up in the sky. Once I get the red on there, now I'm gonna start, I don't wash my brush, I'm just gonna start using yellow and white, and I'm gonna do similar kind of brush strokes, yellow and white, and I just add these right on top of the other ones. I am reloading my brush often. You can see I'm kind of getting a couple pieces to go out here and there. They don't all have to be super long. You can make some of them shorter. You can, of course, make some of them longer, but because I'm using a ton of paint and I'm reloading my brush often, I really am getting a good coverage on this, and I'm not having too many spaces where you can like see through the fire. I realize you can see through most fires, but for me, I like to get it nice and full and, you know, have it look like this is a nice roaring fire here. I'm going to do a couple of little pieces that are shooting out, these little sparks that fly up in the air. And you can also use your blue, especially down here at the bottom. The natural fires will have that blue. I think it's in the hotter spots of the fire. You can totally Google that and find out, fact check me, but I know that there is definitely some blue in fire. So if you wanted it to be more subtle or darker, you can certainly add back some red, or you could go into your black if you wanted to. But again, at this point, once you've got most of it on here, it's all just about doing little touch-ups and fiddling with it to get it to whatever your visual preference is. And then we do have another step to do on the fireplace or on the fire structure, but you're gonna wanna wash and dry this small brush in preparation for that step. Okay, so what we're gonna be doing for this step is we're doing the wood logs or sticks that are gonna be at the bottom of the fire. So your fire might still be wet at this point, which is totally okay. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna be using black paint and white paint with my number 6 round brush. I'm gonna start with just black, and literally all I'm doing is making these long, almost horizontal or diagonal marks through the bottom area of my fire. You could, I guess, bring them out through some of your pieces of rocks as well. Once I get it with black and kind of lay out the groundwork, then I just take white and put a little highlight at the top of it or on it so you can actually see it in front of the big colorful fire that you have going. And then once you get your sticks done, all we have is one more tiny little step, and it's going to be done with the number 6 brush. So after you get your sticks on there, you're going to wash and dry your small brush in preparation for the final step. All right, so the final step to any good painting is to sign it. I'm going to use my small brush. I'm going to sign it in the bottom left or the bottom right corner. And in this painting, you can pick any of these colors to do it. I'm going to actually choose red, yellow, and white at once, so that way I have a complementary color to my whole painting. I'm going to do mine in the bottom left corner. You can do your initials, you could do your whole name. Your personal signature is your personal signature. It's your identifying mark. So whatever you'd like it to be is your choice. And then that is the final step of this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you love your painting, and I look forward to painting with you again.